Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out at a very busy time of year to our attempt to really have a candid conversation about an issue that I know many of us are concerned about, which is underage drinking and our teenagers' social habits around alcohol. My name's Tom Colentis. I am the very proud principal of Libertyville High School, and whoa, my podium is sliding forward. This is good because I like to move around a lot when I talk, so Rob just kept it this way. I can just move the podium back and forth. This is good. This is a new thing, Rob. So thank you so much. We have worked hard to get our group together and to plan this presentation. Please come on in, folks. We have plenty of room down in front here. Rob, Lena, are we having technical difficulties? Or are we? Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah, there we go. So we have some students who are going to speak tonight. Dr. Nelson, our Director of Prevention and Wellness, Mr. John Woods, our Athletic Director. We have some other professional guests who will introduce themselves and speak tonight. But throughout the evening, our goal is to present you some information, but to also create an opportunity for you to interact with us. So if you have a cell phone, I'm going to actually ask you to use it tonight, and it won't be rude, as long as you're not checking the Thursday night football scores, because we are going to ask you to occasionally text in some information, which will then be put up on the screen as a poll. You can either access the information through texting, or if you have an iPhone or a computer phone, you'll be able to access the website and send information in as well. And as soon as our screen is ready, we'll get that up and moving for you. So for me, the reason that I don't want to say I'm necessarily excited to have this conversation, but the reason that I'm pleased we are having this conversation is many of you know I've been at the school for a year, and last year was my first kind of experience at Libertyville High School. I had spent my entire career at Highland Park High School down the road, and I had heard just extraordinary things about Libertyville High School, especially about the student community, the school spirit, the way kids get involved here. And I started in July, and there's no students around in July, and was working in July and August and meeting teachers and meeting staff and administrators, and got so excited to meet students because I had kept hearing about these incredible, amazing Libertyville High School students, and yet I hadn't experienced it. So then it was finally August 15th, the very first day of school, and I was going to meet our students for the very first time. And so I'm a brand new principal. You know, I combed my hair, I got into my Wildcat gear, I got all ready to meet our students and talk about this fantastic school. And all of our seniors showed up wearing their senior t-shirt that said, Class of 2018, one more shot. And it had beer pong on the front of it. And it just kind of took me by surprise, because here we are, this extraordinary high school, and it's our seniors' first day. They're coming to school, and they're here to represent the senior class and the best of Libertyville High School, and their message is one more shot. And this year, our seniors' shirt was Class of 2019, less thinking, more drinking. Right? And that's a shirt that's being worn with pride as a rite of passage at Libertyville High School. This is who we are. This is what we do. We come senior year advertising our party culture, advertising that we're coming to school not to think, but to drink, right? And that just didn't sit well with me because it's so out of alignment with everything that I believe our students are, and everything that I believe you as parents want them to be, and everything that I as a teacher and a professional and our group believes about this high school. And so rather than sweep it under the rug and say, well, you know, it's just one day and it doesn't happen, we decided we need to talk about this because clearly there's a mismatch between what we believe is the best of this community and the best of this high school and some of the behaviors that our students are either actively participating in or at least feeling like even if I don't drink, I have to represent it. All right? I have to help perpetuate it because it's just what we do as Wildcats. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Let's see if this works. Rob, are we on live present? Because if we are, that should have a text number to it. If you're a student, would you raise your hand? How many students do we have here tonight? Excellent. Thank you, students, for coming tonight. How many parents and guardians do we have here tonight? Fantastic. Thank you. You know, the last time, I wasn't here, but I was told the last time we did a presentation like this, we only had about 20 to 30 people in our audience. And tonight we're expecting about 150. Next Thursday we're expecting 150. So clearly your willingness to come here and be part of this conversation is a wonderful step for us in beginning to talk about this culture and to see how we can make some changes. So I don't know if our poll is working, but I was going to ask you about why you're here this evening. And some of the words that come to mind when you think about underage drinking at Libertyville High School. So we'll skip that, and we'll just get into what we're going to talk about tonight. So we are going to spend some time as a school, and I want you to understand something. I do not like any type of appeal that is based on fear. And so it's very important for me as principal that everything we do at this high school is grounded in research of best practice with young people and grounded in our data. And so we're going to talk, when I saw those t-shirts, right, I didn't jump to conclusions that, oh my gosh, we have this huge problem. It was certainly something that alarmed me, but it was only after I started to ask questions and started to look at some data that was being generated not nationwide, but right here in Libertyville that I realized with our team here, this is something that is concerning to us. It's not just a one-day kind of funny thing that happens. It's really infiltrated and become part of many of our students' social lives, right? And so we're going to talk about some of that data and some of that research. We're going to talk about the risks that are posed by underage drinking, and it's stuff that maybe you've heard before, but I think we can bring it home in some ways that maybe you haven't thought about before. Because I know as a parent and as a principal, I'm a parent of high school students and a principal of 2,000 students. Every single day I think about this and I worry about this. Every time we have a homecoming dance, a turnabout dance, prom, I can't sleep that night for fear that I'm going to get a phone call at 2 a.m. telling me we've had an accident. And I've had those phone calls in my career, right? So I know it happens. And for us to just think about that for some time and talk a little bit about what that does, not just to the child, but to the family, to the friends, to the community. We're going to talk about some strategies that we believe we can begin with helping to reduce teen drinking. We're under no illusions. This meeting is not going to solve this problem. We're going to have lots of conversations and lots of continued work on this topic. And then we're going to try to think about ways we can keep that going to generate some action and momentum. Okay, so that's what we plan to do tonight. Probably be about 75 minutes to 90 minutes. Try to be done right around 8:30 and give you an opportunity to ask us some questions as well. So with that, thank you for coming. I'm going to introduce Dr. Brenda Nelson, our school's Director of Prevention and Wellness. And I have to say, one of the reasons I chose to come to Libertyville High School was because this district had understood that student health and wellness was so important that we were going to invest in having a prevention and wellness expert here in our building on staff every single day to do that research, to distill that down, and to say, this is what we need to do to make the healthiest, happiest students we can. So Dr. Nelson, thank you for your work, and turn to you. you're on. Oh, you're not on.
Are you there? Okay. Mrs. Trout, are there still people waiting up? Okay. If there's some seats up here in the first couple, or the second and third rows, if you guys want to come on down. So thank you. All right. Let's get to... so Tom referenced data and research, and it is something that is a very strong value, a principle that we base our strategies when it comes to prevention, is that we really want to look at what works. And there's some things that we know don't work. One of those is scare tactics, as Tom referred to, as well as just kind of splash in the pond kind of effort. So we really want to be as strategic as possible and as balanced in our approach. So one thing that we've now done for the past 3 years is collect data. This is a school-wide survey called the Illinois Youth Survey. The University of Illinois has a Center for Prevention Research and Development who's developed this tool. When we get the data back, it's 93 pages. We're not going to cover that tonight. But it gives us a really good sense of where our students are in terms of their decision making. You might hear your kids say, oh, kids see that as a joke, or they don't really take it seriously. But with a really well-developed research tool, there's ways to correct for that. So we consider this to be very reliable and valid data. And we're just going to share a couple of points with you. In the past year, so you can see that the navy blue is how students answered in 16, the light blue in 2017, the yellow in 2018. And when it says 2016 suburban counties, that's our comparison group. And it only says it for 10th and 12th grade because statewide that tends to be, those are the grades that where statewide people take that test. We just elect to have all of our students take it. But you can see that as students progress through their years, that alcohol use increases. For the past 2 years, our seniors, 65% have consumed alcohol in the past year. So just kind of take that in a little bit. And you can also see that compared to the 2016 data, we are higher than the state average, or through our comparison group data. So then the past 30-day use, which may be an indicator of more regular drinking than reported past year use. So then we can see there that if you can look at the highest bar, that 53% of our seniors in the past year reported drinking the past 30 days. So this, when we take the survey, we try to situate it at a point where it hasn't, the past 30 days has not included a school vacation or a school dance. So we try to get the lowest minimum. So you know, if this were to be taken after, say, turnabout or closer to a school break, that might be a little bit higher. But as you can see, also our data, especially for seniors, is considerably higher than our comparison group. So binge drinking, defined as 5 or more drinks in a 2-hour sitting. A third of our seniors last year reported binge drinking in the past 2 weeks, which does meet the criteria of a potential substance use disorder. So that is of particular concern. Good news is our 9th grade numbers are quite low, and we would like to keep them low. And in those other 2 data points in terms of past 30 days and past year use, we really want to bring down those numbers as much as possible. And then this is just another interesting thing in our last slide that we'll look at our data, is that our seniors who have our highest use have this perception from parents that they're not really disapproving. They're not seeing their alcohol use as being wrong or very wrong. So we're not going to try to go into the whys of that, but it's just an interesting point to consider. So as we're framing this conversation, I think it's important to think or to consider that we're not trying to say all drinking is bad. Obviously, there's a lot of adults that consume alcohol in a very responsible way. But sometimes we can get conflicted about the messages that we're sending our kids. Well, you know, I have a glass of wine with dinner. sometimes 2 glasses of wine. Who am I to tell my kid that they can't drink? Or they need to get my child ready for college. There's a lot of these messages that can go. But if we're thinking about problematic drinking, there's really 4 main categories. It's pregnancy, drinking while pregnant, drinking and driving, binge drinking, and underage drinking. So if we can kind of bring underage drinking into that mindset, that it is very much a health decision, it's affecting brain development, and that's why that we need to be talking about this in a very serious kind of way, and also in a public health kind of way. My guess, this is a question to parents, how many of you, when you were younger, wore your seatbelts? Okay, so a few. How many your families, like this is my family, like we didn't wear seatbelts, it wasn't a thing, right? Same with, I shouldn't say never, until I was probably 16 or 17, did not wear a bike helmet. In fact, I wore a motorcycle helmet while riding my bike, but that was because it was a race, and anyway, we weren't wearing bike helmets, right, until probably like the late 80s or sometime in the 90s. So we want to be thinking about underage drinking from a public health perspective, just as we maybe didn't wear seatbelts or bike helmets, but now we would be very upset if our children weren't doing this. Maybe parents grew up with the mindset because the science wasn't there about underage drinking, that, okay, I drank, so therefore it's okay for my kids, but we know now. We know that it's not good for the teenage brain, that there's a lot of damage that can be done, thus the conversation. Dr. Watson is going to be getting more into specifics on the teen brain. I want to introduce a couple of awesome young people who are going to present a student voice relative to this issue. And then after them, we're going to have Dr. Bill Watson speak, and we're going to have Judge Stride, and then Elliot Pinzel. And so that's going to be the lineup from here. So first, I would like to introduce Maya Gavratilovich. No, I know, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there at some point. And even with the roll of the tongue, I will get there. But Maya is a junior, and after her is going to be Matt Smith, and he is a senior. So thank you guys for coming and sharing your story.
Hello, everyone, and good evening. My name is Maya Gavrilovich, and I'm a junior here at LHS. I'm involved in theater, orchestra, choir, and link crew leader here at LHS. So when I was younger, and still to this day, my mom had always had conversations with me about peer pressure, drugs, and alcohol. Because of these conversations, I had decided from a young age that I would stay drugs and alcohol free. I have also chosen this path in order to maintain my respect for my peers, as well as for academic reasons. I want my future to be as successful as I can possibly make it. This past July, I had an amazing opportunity to travel to Eastern Illinois University to attend the 43rd Annual Sabrin Goodman Teen Institute, also known as CGTI, with a group of 5 LHS students. At this statewide Prevention Leadership Week, we heard speakers attend workshops and engaged in many group discussions about how to make a difference in our community. It provided us with a lot of exposure about how to be healthy individually, as well as how to implement an action plan in our community. CGTI primarily focuses on drug and alcohol prevention, but also includes an emphasis on other health choices we face as teens. For any student here interested in developing leadership and staying on a healthy drug and alcohol-free path, I would highly recommend this opportunity. As far as I know, we were the first group ever from Libertyville to attend this conference. I am one of a growing number of students at our school who is passionate about this topic of drug and alcohol prevention, and we are excited and ready to make a change at our school and in our community. We know this doesn't happen overnight, but we are committed to helping Libertyville be as healthy as it possibly can be. Thank you.
All right. So like Dr. Nelson said, my name is Matt Smith, and I'm a senior here at LHS. I'm a varsity team captain of the boys cross country team, a 4-year member of the track team, a link crew leader, an editor of a school paper, and an NHS member and Live the Life of a Wildcat, which means being happier, healthier, and higher performing. Also, before I get into my speech, I wanted to share you guys something about my mindset, which we did today at Green Dot Training. If you want to know what Green Dot Training is, I'll be happy to tell you after the fact. My personal creed is, take a positive outlook on life, because life isn't life without happiness. My biggest influence in life is probably my parents. They are always supportive of me no matter what I do, and they will be hard on me when I'm not living up to their expectations. I like to credit my parents and coffee for making it this far. But on a more serious note, as far as the decisions I make, like I said, I'm a varsity team captain of the boys cross country team. And if I'm out late partying the night before meet, or any night during the season, and I show up the next day, not only will I have a bad practice, but I will have a bad race that week. And I will not be getting better in any way. I will be taking one giant step back in my sport. Not only that, but I can cause a lot of damage to my brain and my body, and that is not something I want as my brain is finishing developing. Also, I would be letting my team down, my coaches down, and the town down as well. Also, to top that off, my cross-country team has a chance to make the state meet for the first time in 30 years. And I do not want my bad decisions to be the reason that my team doesn't accomplish their goals. Even if we didn't have a chance to make it, I have always felt that I'm a leader on the team, and now that I'm a team captain and a link crew leader, I have freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors all looking up to me for leadership and to make the right choices. If the freshmen see me as a team captain making poor decisions, whether it is on social media or anywhere, that could affect their track to making the right decisions and going down the right path. I know that in my position, I can't make those decisions. I was taught that as a freshman from people like Alex Tam, Joe Gassick, and a lot of the other alumni that I looked up to. They taught me that if you want to be great in anything, it starts with the choices you make off the course, court, or field. Over the summer, I went to the Olympic Training Center in Lake Placid, New York, with 12 people from LHS. I think there are 2 out in the audience. During this week, we listened to kids from other high schools and John Underwood, who trains Olympic and professional athletes. He came to school last year. I don't know if he's coming to school this year, but I would definitely go check him out. He talks about the effects of alcohol on the brain and all other drugs with their effect on the brain, and about getting the correct amount of sleep and eating right as well. However, the part that stuck with me the most was listening to the Navy SEALs and what it took in order to get through their training. Listening to the story of Navy SEALs training and how they were pushed to the brink of quitting so many times, and each time their brother in training had their back because they were going to either succeed together or fail together. Just a little story that they told us. The SEAL that spoke to us had chafed so badly that 70% of his body was chafing, and they were soaking wet and freezing from going into the water so many times. And the Navy SEALs have a bell. And during training, if you ring that bell, you quit. The SEAL was so close to giving up and ringing that bell when he finally got dry clothes for the first time. But he didn't. He stood by his brothers and got right back into the water. I think that was something pretty impressive, that they would stick by each other through all the pain and suffering and lack of sleep till you get through training and become a Navy SEAL. That was an experience I'll never forget. So to wrap up, that was a little about me and my story. And there are so many kids just like me out there who are making great decisions, but somehow go down the wrong path. And I think we can all stop that from happening. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Bill Watson, who is a trauma surgeon or head of the trauma unit at Condell Hospital.
All right, thank you. Thank you. I'm having a little bit of a flashback. I'm in high school. I'm sitting in between the principal, the SRO, and the chief of police. I feel very safe. So anyway, this doesn't count towards my time right now, okay? I just want to, Mr. Pinzel, Judge Stride, and myself give these talks to a lot of schools. We've been trying since 2009 to get into this school to talk, and we've had a lot of resistance. This is the first year that we've been able to do this. So I just want to thank Dr. Fuentes, Dr. Nelson, bravo. So, there we go. All right, my name is Bill Watson. I'm a general surgeon. I practice here in Libertyville, and I have both the pleasure and I guess the pain of being in charge of trauma at Condell. Now, Condell, you may or may not know, is a level 1 trauma center. And what that means is that we take care of all the big traumas for all of Lake County. We see about 2,700 severe trauma cases a year. We take care of Lake County, parts of McHenry, parts of Cook, and even now parts of Kenosha County. All of the sick people get flown in, as you may have seen the helicopters flying over or heard them, sorry. They come to see us. We see about 2,700 trauma patients a year. About 76% of those are car accidents. Now, if we break those down, 70% of the car accidents that we see involve some sort of substance abuse, which blows my mind. About 28% of the car accidents or other traumas we see are people under 21 years old. Now, if we include car accidents and kids and alcohol, whenever we have a child, about 73% of the car accidents, believe it or not, involve some sort of substance and kids. Now, if we add distracted driving, it goes up obviously to 100%. And I'm sorry with the guys with the camera, I tend to walk around a lot, so I apologize. What we're going to do now, most importantly, I'm the father of 3 boys, and I have a son that goes here, and I can't say his name because he says he'll be too embarrassed. But my son asked me, why do you do this? You work already too much. And whenever someone mentions that, I think back to this case, and I'm going to show you a few examples, and I'm under a time constraint. So I have a few examples of some of the stuff, and what I want to stress to you is 99.9% of the bad things that happen to our students never make it in the newspaper. Most of them don't. So I'm going to give you the kind of the worst of the worst examples, but it may not be something as severe as what I'm going to show you. And I don't have any gross pictures. One of them may kind of, but nothing too gross. But I always think when my son asked me, why do I do this? I think back to this. This was a car accident in 2009 when we first became a level 1 trauma center. 2 young men were getting ready to graduate another high school, and they went downtown Chicago to a concert. They drank, they smoked some weed, and then they tried to drive home. On I-94, they hit a bridge embankment going about 70, 80 miles an hour. Now, I don't know if you can see, let's see, where's my laser? Do I have a laser here? Oh boy. Come on. Come on. Can we reverse this? On the back side? I tried that. No. Is it possible to go back a couple slides? Keep going. One more. All right, so this car accident, the passenger, I don't know if you can see in the right windshield, there's a hole in the windshield. That's where his head went through the windshield. He needed about 13 surgeries for reconstruction. He was pretty much scalped. These were 2 young men going to U of I on engineering scholarships. Smart kids. They made bad choices. And you always think back of where could this have changed? What could I have done differently in this case? The driver was found, I don't know if you can see that little pole sticking in the back left of the car. That's a light pole from the freeway. The young man who was driving was found underneath that in the back of the car. Now, no, I don't think any of you, or maybe some of you, this is an x-ray of a pelvis, one of the hardest bones in the human body. If you hurt this, you've sustained a lot of trauma. This is a normal one. And if you look, the left looks like the right looks like the left. It's mirror images. This is the x-ray of the young man who came in. Now he's got a broken leg on the right side, but you can see his pelvis is just crushed. This young man, this is a serious injury. It's a life-threatening injury. To operate on this, it takes time to get someone to the operating room. You have to set up a lot of tools. This young man came in high as a kite, crying, laughing, low blood pressure. We had to make that phone call that no parent ever wants to hear. I never want to hear. Your son's been in a car accident. You need to come to the hospital now. We called his mom. By the time she got there, unfortunately, he died. I could not get him to the operating room soon enough because of the massive amount of blood flow to the pelvis. Couldn't get him there quick enough. The last thing he said before he died, as I'm sitting there watching him, is, "Tell my mom I'm sorry I effed up." That's why I'm here, because I would never want to get that phone call, and I never want to make that phone call. Unfortunately, we've had to, but that's why we're here. And I don't want this to happen to my 3 knuckleheads. Now, it's not just car accidents. A lot of people say, well, I don't let my kids drink. They can drive, but I'm going to put them in the basement. I'll be with them. It'll be okay. Well, we've got some people, not only kids, but adults make bad choices as well. This happened a couple years ago at Third Lake. A 17-year-old and his father were doing shots of Jägermeister and other substances. and they decided to take the jet skis out on the lake at about 2 o'clock in the morning. The young man ran into a pier going about 30 miles an hour in the dark, face first. Now, again, in a lot in medicine, we look at symmetry. So this is a CT scan or an X-ray of the neck, and we look for symmetry. And if we look kind of up towards the left there, you can see that it's not symmetrical. That's where he broke his neck. This young man will never, ever be able to use his left arm again. 17 years old. Not only he made a bad choice, but unfortunately for some reason his father did too. He got off kind of lucky. It could have been worse. He will never, ever have function of his left arm again because of his broken neck. It happens whenever I give this talk and you say, oh, the alcohol, yeah, Zion, Waukegan, Round Lake, they're a bunch of alcoholics. It happens everywhere. It happens in this school all of the time from the data you just saw from Dr. Nelson. We've had students at this school with broken necks, with bleeding inside the head. That's the equivalent of a stroke, and they don't graduate high school once that happens. We've had kids who would never go to school again because of some of the bad choices they've made. And it's seriously just a bad choice. These are great kids. They've made bad choices. And we're going to get into this in a minute, but it's kind of not their fault. Now, the students in the room, and I'm going to call you kids, I apologize. It's kind of not your fault. Your brain doesn't work right yet. And we're going to get into that in a second. And our job as parents is to kind of pretend to be their brain so they can make those good choices. Still, a lot of people say, well, I'm going to put the kids in the basement, let them drink, I have their keys. What can happen? And this is what happens most frequently. This is from earlier this year. A young lady, she's 15 years old, was at an end of the school year party, drinking, doing other stuff. She says, I'm going to get sick, and tried to run to the bathroom. She tripped, fell, hit her face on the toilet, broke every bone in her face. Now, as you'll hear in a little bit, that's the parents that were hosting that party, that's a social hosting, and that's a felony. If a felony is being committed in your house, guess what? Your homeowner's insurance isn't going to pay for her health. The parents of the kid that was hosting this, they had to come up with about $183,000 out of their pocket for her medical expenses to reconstruct her face. But they were just in the basement. This is what happens all of the time. I think this is my last. This was a young man from another school. He got a Division I scholarship to play baseball. Really good baseball team. Parents were so proud of him. They saved him hundreds of thousands of dollars probably. They bought him a brand new BMW. At the end of school, he went out, getting ready to graduate. He took his girlfriend out with him. They drank. They took some other substances. They had sex. And then he was driving her home, and he flipped the car. She was thrown out. This 16-year-old girl who weighed maybe about 85 pounds, permanent brain damage. She got thrown from the car. She was not making good choices. She wasn't wearing her seatbelt. She got into a car with someone who was driving drunk. She was drunk. What reminds me of this case is this young lady who weighed probably 90 pounds at the most. Her blood alcohol was the highest I have ever seen in my life. It was about 0.5. That alone can kill you, not being thrown out of a car going 40 miles an hour. I deal with a lot of drunks, and that is the highest alcohol I've ever seen in my life. So these are just some examples. Everyone here has heard on the newspaper, things like that, all the college kids who were drunk, they fell off a balcony, they went to bed drunk and never woke up. And these are just some, I just pulled these off the internet in 2 minutes. So, Dr. Nelson already went over this, but I want to stress how bad our data is. 65% of our students drank last year. The national average is about 30%. It's that bad. We have, I don't know the exact definition of an epidemic, but I would consider this probably an epidemic. And a lot of people say, well, you know, the alcohol in Lake County, it's some of the other places you don't want to live. If we look at the number of ER visits for alcohol, Fox Lake, Libertyville, Lake Forest, Highland Park, Mundelein, Vernon Hills, these are the places that we're seeing. It's not Round Lake. And North Chicago is over there, but that actually needs to be corrected because a lot of people in North Chicago, their entire health is through the ER. When kids drink, they don't drink to enjoy a nice 1979 Bordeaux, blah, blah, blah. They drink because it's really hard being a kid these days, and I see the kids already shaking their heads. I don't even know if I could get into college these days, how hard it is. If we look, on average, adults drink more frequently. But if we look how much you drink, kids tend to drink more when they drink. And that's where we go back to that binge drinking, which is deadly. Binge drinking is deadly. 1 in 3 of our kids were partaking in something that could be deadly last year. So what I want to focus on, and again, I'm not a neurologist, I'm not a social behaviorist, I'm a simple surgeon. This is the way I understand this. So this is the brain. There's 2 parts of the brain that we're really going to focus on. This blue part up front is called the prefrontal cortex, and that's the part of the brain that says don't do that. That's not good for you. It's our control. It kind of balances all the bad things we want to do with the good things. The other part we're going to focus on is called the amygdala. That's the part of the brain that says, wow, that ice cream was good. Let's have another pint. That's the reward part of our brain. So we have the reward part and the control part. Those 2 parts of the brain balance one another. Now, when we develop, we are born with as many brain cells as we're ever going to have. And what happens is those brain cells develop with time. And they develop by getting fat laid down, kind of like insulation on an extension cord. And what happens is the brain actually develops from the back forward. So that amygdala actually develops before that prefrontal cortex. So what happens? The part of the brain that says, that was good, is the dominant part. So if we look, I'll skip over that because I know I'm already probably behind. So I'm taking this back to a little bit of biology. This is an axon and a neuron. So this axon here, this is the part that gets the fat deposit. It's called myelin. Alcohol affects this in 2 different ways. One, as it says on the top, it slows the rate at which that fat is deposited in the brain. On top of that, it speeds the amount of time that the brain says, ooh, that neuron doesn't have any fat on it, it must not work, get rid of it. So not only does it slow the fat deposition, it increases the rate at which we get rid of the cells that don't seem to work right. And if you don't have myelin, it don't work right. Okay, does that make sense? Pretty kind of basic stuff. So, as an adolescent, that amygdala is dominant over that prefrontal cortex. Well, you add alcohol. What happens? You have decreased planned thinking, increased impulsiveness, decreased self-control, and increased risk-taking. Any parent here have anyone at their home who does that? Everybody. That is adolescence in a nutshell. I'm fearless. I will not get hurt no matter what I do. I can jump off this building. What we hope is with time is as that fat is deposited, that prefrontal cortex takes over and says, as we were just saying, I got to meet in the morning. And some brains develop a little bit quicker than others. That meet in the morning, if I drink, I'm not going to do very well. That scholarship may be. And what they've actually done, they've done studies on this where they take 2 groups of monkeys. And they took one group and said, all right, we're going to give them nice beds, we're going to play nice music, give them good monkey chow. And then they're going to take another group and stress them out. We're going to give them bad beds, bad monkey chow, and make them listen to Cardi B all day. Is that a good one? Is that a good one? I don't know. Maybe she's good. I don't know. Guess which group drank more? The stressed out monkeys. And monkey brains are just like ours. So students with schools, with social media, everything, there's a lot of stress, and they're looking for that release. What we want that prefrontal cortex is to eventually take over. Now, if we look at kids who drink on a regular basis, it's, as Dr. Clinton said, it's based in fact. If you drink on a regular basis, your grades typically go down about 10% from an A to a B. Try getting into U of I engineering or Notre Dame or Northwestern with a B. It's simple as that. It affects everything. Now, is it one drink? I don't know. Nobody knows. Is it 5 drinks? Maybe. Is it 10? Is it 5 weekends? We don't know. But we know it affects the brain development. It affects all the rest of the body. Now, I'm not going to pick on you, but we got a football player here. What other athletes do we have in the room? Any other athletes? So there was actually a study that came out is if you drink to legal drunkenness, it's like not working out for 14 days. So you lose muscle mass, you lose the speed, you're not going to do as well in that meet. It affects every organ of the body. Every organ of the body, as you're growing up, is still developing. There are long-term effects of this as well. There's a 60% increased risk of sexually transmitted disease. Again, increased risk-taking accentuated by alcohol. There's an 8% risk of pregnancy. And then a lot of times these young ladies who are pregnant don't even know they're pregnant, and they continue to drink. And then we have a child with developmental delays. There's a 12% increase in rape reports. Now I showed you that picture of the BMW and the young lady. The young man was 18 and she was 16. He was actually charged with statutory rape as well. For the rest of his life, he is a sex offender. He cannot be a Boy Scout leader. He can't serve in his church. He can't live near a school. His entire life is screwed up by bad choices. 12% increase in rape, 40% increase of deviant behavior. Meeting these gentlemen here, I feel safe, but we don't want to do that. There is a 43% increased risk of MVA. So, I'm trying to go as fast as I can, I'm sorry. Oh, MVA is a motor vehicle accident, sorry, I didn't fix that one. So, now my conclusions, I'm not trying to offend anyone, I'm just trying to be honest. And I was someone who's in the room told me not to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm always in trouble at home. So Northeastern Illinois has one of the worst adolescent alcohol abuse issues in the country. They used to keep track of this. We used to be number 5 in the country in alcohol abuse. They don't keep that data anymore, so I don't have anything current, but we're one of the worst. It's not, we've got a great school, a great community. We're bad at this. There's irrefutable evidence that alcohol consumption affects brain development. No brainer, sorry the pun. No one loves your children as much as you do. And you're going to hear this from Mr. Penzel. You're going to be if you want to be the cool parent, have the party. As soon as something bad happens, no one knows you. No one, oh, I never liked them. No one loves your children. You can send someone out with your best friend's kid. They don't love them as much as you do, and you have to protect them. Our jobs as parents, in my opinion, are to be that prefrontal cortex until theirs develops. Help them make those right choices. And with that, actions speak louder than words. You can tell your children, no, don't drink, that's bad. But if you're sitting out at Butler Lake watching a baseball game with a koozie full of, or a Yeti full of wine, your kids know, and they think it's okay. If you're out in the parking lot getting liquored up during a baseball tournament, your kids know. And they say, well, he said no, but he means yes. You got to use your own prefrontal cortex as well. And that's the part I'm probably going to get in trouble for. There is irrefutable evidence that discussions like this help. The data shows if you talk to your kids and say alcohol is bad, believe it or not, they listen. The data shows, and even with the Illinois Youth Survey, their #1 influence is their parents. If you have a passive view, it's the same as saying, it's probably okay. So with that, I'm out of time. I used to be able to put pictures of my kids up here, and I have for the past 9 years, but I've been banned by my son now. So I got to put my girlfriend up here. So, all right, thank you very much.
So while we fear our children winding up in an emergency room, we also have consequences that affect families, and Judge Stride is here to talk a little bit about that.
20 minutes. Sorry.
So we've done this so long that we were taking bets how long each other would take, and so far Bill's the clubhouse winner at 20 minutes. But anyhow, thank you very much for being here. I would echo what the principal said. It's wonderful when we come out and we have a full room, not because we like to hear ourselves talk, but it means that you're interested in this, and we're grateful for that. Do you have the clicker, Bill? Thanks. So, summer of 2007, I had been a judge for a little less than 2 years, and I had left the traffic courts, and I was assigned to the main courthouse, and I took over a misdemeanor DUI docket. And I was told that I had what we call around the courthouse a heater case, and I was told that by my friend Elliot Pincel. And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "That Deerfield parent case. Aren't you familiar with that?" And I really was terribly unfamiliar with it. But I got up to speed in a hurry when the case was first in front of me. Normally what we do in courts is very micro, right? We have a individual case that we deal with. We see it from the beginning to the end, and we move on to the next case. This case we knew, all of us, the lawyers, myself, and as it turned out, I think the community realized that this is one of those unique cases that had a real macro effect on not just our community, but across the country as well. Jeff and Sarah Hutzel were residents of Deerfield, and they lived in a beautiful home. He was an extremely successful Harvard-educated businessman who had achieved phenomenal success in his life. And they had a son named Tyler, and Tyler had graduated the year before from Deerfield High School, and he was a freshman at Kansas University. Tyler came home for the Deerfield homecoming football game. The thing about the Hutzel's house, it was located almost directly behind Deerfield High School. It was literally within walking distance to the football field. Tyler came home and he went to the football game with some of his friends who hadn't gone to school, some of his friends who were home from school, and some of his friends that were still at the high school. We eventually found out that they had brought water bottles with them to the football game containing a clear liquid, either gin or vodka or some such thing. And they walked right through the security and right into the football stadium, and they started drinking and watching the football game. They eventually decided to go home, and they went back to the Hutzel's house, and soon that group of maybe 8 or 10 kids, as frequently happens, blasted them into a group of about 40 people in the Hutzel's house. This is the driveway that leads to the Hutzel's house. You go down that driveway around the corner to the right, and then shortly after that, you'll see there's the curve there. And that driveway there is the driveway to the Hutzel's house, sort of in the center back portion of the photograph. The Hutzel's house, as I mentioned, was beautiful. I mean, it's the kind of house that I think anybody would dream of having. They had a 4-car garage, and what was interesting about that garage is it had a stairway that led directly into the basement from the interior of the garage. So you didn't have to go into the house to go into the basement. You could simply walk into the garage, down a flight of stairs, and go into that basement. There's the Hutzel's driveway. There's a closer look, and there's a little glare on the screen, but those 2 trees sort of to the left of the driveway, immediately to the left of the driveway, they'll play a bigger part in what happened in this story. There were 2 boys at that party in particular. One was named Danny Bell, the other was named Ross Trace. Danny had graduated with Tyler Hutzel, and Ross was still at Deerfield High School. At some point during the party, they wanted to go to a local 7-Eleven or convenience mart. So Danny got into his car, which was sort of a souped-up Volkswagen, one of the GTI Volkswagens. And Danny drove. Ross sat directly behind Danny. And then there was a boy in the front passenger seat and 2 boys in the rear seat. So a total of 3 boys across the back seat, 2 boys in front. They go to the convenience store. They come back, and you saw that driveway. They decided to see how fast that car would go. There was also some testimony that while they were sitting in the car deciding where to go, get something to eat, they smoked weed as well. So they had been drinking at the party, now they're smoking weed, now they get in the car, they drive, they come back, they're punching it down this street trying to get back to the Hutzel's house. What that is the driver's side door of Danny Bell's car. you saw those curves and those corners when you're going 70 miles an hour, which is approximately what the expert witness testified to, or was actually stipulated to during the course of the trial. Kind of hard to turn your car, especially if you're intoxicated. So the car hits this tree, and sort of physics takes over. What happened is the car sort of dove down when it hit the tree, almost into the tree. And then that part of the car that extends from the hood to the roof, that metal piece is called the pillar. The pillar caught on that tree. It ripped the door off, and it ripped the roof off and peeled it back, like you would open a can of tuna, if you will. That's what the car looked like. After the car hit the tree, it spun around a few times, came to rest, literally, in the lawn of the Hutzel's driveway. Danny spills out of the car, significantly injured. The boy in the front passenger seat is covered with glass. The two of the boys in the back seat, the one in the middle and the one all the way to the right, also covered with glass. They run out of the car, they run back into the Hutzel's residence, and they start screaming, "Call 911." Ross never made it out of the car. And again, I'm not trying to upset anybody, but these are the facts of this case. You see a red coat there. Deerfield's colors are red and white. Ross was a twin. He had a brother. Ross was a varsity athlete. And when that roof peeled back, it hit basically the top of Ross's head and took it off. Killed him instantly. When the boys ran into the house, they started calling 911, yelling, "Call 911, call 911." The Hutzel's response to that was, well, first of all, the response of the students at the party was to do exactly what you think it would be. They ran like hell. I mean, the place emptied out, faster than you could possibly imagine. And a couple of them stayed behind, and they helped the Hutzel's clean up. And what the police found was what you would expect to find, not on the T-shirt of a Libertyville senior, but the ubiquitous sort of red Solo cups or beer pong cups, because there was testimony in this trial that they were playing beer pong, doing shots, doing any number of different drinking games. Beer cans, more beer cans. One of the water bottles that smelled of alcohol was a testimony of the evidence technician that picked that up. That is a bar in the basement of the Hutzel's house. The first officer on the scene, when he hit the stairs to go down into the basement, said the place smelled like a brewery. The smell of alcohol was overwhelming. There's a flight of stairs leading up to the Hutzel's residence. For the life of me, from this angle, I have no idea what that is. So I can't even tell you what that is. I think these are all pictures of the interior of the basement. That's for Elliot. And if we can go back one, I'd appreciate it. So at the time, the police did an investigation, and there was no real charge in Illinois about providing alcohol or providing an environment in which minors can drink. The state's attorney's office charged this case under the Illinois Liquor Control Act, in a violation of the Illinois Liquor Control Act for providing an environment for minors to consume alcohol was a Class A misdemeanor, which carried with it only a year in jail, a fine of $2,500 or both. This case literally changed the law in Illinois, and it created a number of the social hosting laws across the United States. It was this case that did that. Now, if that were to happen, that's a Class 4 felony. You can go to prison for 1 to 3 years, up to 6 years if you're eligible for an extended sentence. You could be on parole for a year, or you could be fined up to $25,000. Let me talk about the trial if I can. I'll try to do this in 10 minutes. It was a week-long trial, so it'll be tough. The state gave what's called testimonial immunity to any number of kids that were in that basement. And immunity means this. we will not prosecute you if you tell us what happened. And each kid had to write a statement and sign the statement and verify that that was the truth. And the state said, okay, we can call you as a witness. You have to provide this testimony at trial. If you don't, we can turn around and charge you with a misdemeanor being a minor in possession of alcohol. That process is not inexpensive. I'm told anecdotally by the lawyers that did that, and it was about 15 kids that they called to testify, they charged them anywhere from $1,500 to $5,000, depending on which lawyer they reached out to. Not an inexpensive proposition. I had to vet every single one of those deals. In other words, I had to bring the witnesses back into chambers. I had to go over the deal with them, ask them if they understood what the consequence was, if they agreed to be truthful and consistent with their testimony. Then they went out and provided that testimony. And what was interesting, if not completely disheartening, was none of the kids that I had that conversation with seemed to care. They seemed rather unaffected by all this. And I began to scratch my head and think to myself, what in the world is going on here? How is this not something that was a life-altering experience for these kids? What also struck me is, I had been a prosecutor for, on and off for about a dozen years. I had tried about 15 homicide cases. I don't know how many sexual assault cases. I don't know how many gang and cheating cases. And there were some cases that I had where there was some media coverage of it. Not that I cared, but there were sometimes you'd look out there and you'd see a reporter sitting there. What struck me about this case is the very first day the case is up, and I was handling it as the trial judge, the courtroom was packed, and my deputy came back to get me. He said, "Judge, they're ready for you, but I have to tell you the entire press corps is out in your courtroom." And I thought, yeah, this must be how they treat the new guy, ha, 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 this will be a real prank to plan. Yeah, and I walked outside, and sure enough, the entire Chicago press corps was sitting in my courtroom, Channel 2, Channel 5, Channel 7, Channel 9, Fox, print reporters. This case received coverage nationally. Does anybody remember when this happened? Okay. I get a phone call halfway through the first week of trial from a very good friend of mine from high school and says, "Are you trying a case about minors drinking?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "It's in the International Herald Tribune. I'm in London." This went international. Elliot was getting phone calls from Fox, CNN, NBC. They all were looking to cover this case. Now, why does that matter? Well, how would you like to be the Hutzels? The absolute worst moment of your life is under the intense microscope of the media. And this isn't a shot at the media, but the media is a lot different today than it was when I was in high school. All those kids that had to testify in front of that press corps. Every bad decision those parents made was trotted out and replayed in front of all the world to see. And it was hell. I sat there. The thing that's interesting about being a judge is you have a different perspective. I don't mean philosophical, I mean physical perspective. The whole courtroom's looking at you. You're looking at everybody in the courtroom. And if there were a rock in my courtroom, both Mr. and Mrs. Hutzel would have been fighting to crawl underneath it. It was a really amazing thing to watch happen. Now, not much shocks me anymore. I'm in the 14th year on the bench. I've been practicing law almost 27 years. But something shocked me in this case. The case took about a whole week to put on. And I brought everybody in on a Saturday because I didn't want it to go into the Monday. There was so much press coverage, I didn't want to give 2 days of unfettered media coverage of this case to somehow influence the jury. So I brought them back in on Saturday, and I got there early, and I'm going through the instructions, and the deputy knocks on my door and says that the lawyers want to come back and see you, and that's usually a really bad sign, by the way, when that happens. So I thought, okay, great. So, Elliot and I started in the state's attorney's office together. We've been friends for a long time, and Elliot walks in and he's looking at his shoes, which is, wasn't good. And I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "You're not going to believe this. The boy that was in the front seat of that car, when it hit the tree, got arrested last night in Deerfield for minor in possession and consumption of alcohol. And I thought to myself, what the hell is going on? And I think we just heard what was going on. And I think Dr. Watson provided the best, most logical explanation for what happened. And it's harder on young men than it is on women. Not a whole lot harder. Young women, their brain matures a little bit more quickly on average than young men do. But I think what I was seeing was that amygdala kicking the butt of the frontal lobe. And the decisions that were being made were not being made by rational adults, but by physically immature young men. Now, that's not an excuse, because criminal liability doesn't recognize that. If you do it and you're an adult, you get charged. So don't hire Dr. Watson as your expert witness when you get arrested for something like this, because it's not going to make a darn bit of difference, because that's not a defense to this kind of behavior. Here's what I would say, and I'm reluctant to say this, but the chief always says, don't give advice. Don't give, whatever you do when you go out in public, don't give legal advice. So here's my advice. I am the parent of a 23-year-old that's out of college, lives and works in the city. I have a 21-year-old that's a senior that goes to school down in Nashville, and I have one that's a senior in high school. I grew up in the county. I graduated from Lake Forest High School. I just wanted to talk, so I feel like I have a little street cred based on what I've seen. You know, when I started high school, it was the 70s, and it was a much different time than it is now, that's for sure. And we've learned a lot. Addictionologists are now, that's now a thing. You're an addictionologist. Brain mapping is now a thing. When we talked about why kids made the decisions that they made, we relied on anecdotal information. When did you start drinking? Why did you start drinking? Now we can map the brain and we know exactly what's going on. We didn't know that when I was in high school. So this is an emerging field of science. What we know now, without any doubts, is that you really, really can damage yourself beyond repair. And you can put yourself in positions legally that can alter the course of your life. Every single story that Dr. Watson told involved somebody altering their life. This case altered the life not just of the boys that died in that car, but Mr. and Mrs. Hutzel. And here's the thing, they weren't bad people. Quite the contrary, they were great people that made an unbelievably horrible decision that cost them everything. I got over 140 letters in support of them prior to sentencing, talking about the things that they did, the charities that they were involved in, the Katrina relief trips that they organized with the youth from their church to go down to New Orleans and help them, to see how philanthropic they were, how generous they were with their time and their talents and their finances. My guess is there are people in this audience that would do the exact same thing and do it every day and do it with a smile on your face. That was the Hutzels. But this decision will haunt them for the rest of their lives. They had to sell their house. They lost everything. He lost his job. He had to move they moved, I'm told, to the Kansas City, Missouri area, and they started over. But I promise you one thing, there's not a day that goes by that they don't think about that night. And there's not a day that goes by in Tyler's life where he doesn't think about the decisions that he made that impacted his parents. So this is literally my advice, and it truly is not as a judge, it is as a parent. Those kids that I talked about all went to a high school which I think is almost identical to this one. Socially, academically, I was going to say athletically, but you guys have had the better run football-wise the last few years. But the truth is, they all survived. And I think one thing that we did, my wife and I had always done from the time my son started high school, is we made a point to get to know the parents of their friends. And we did that for my son and then my 2 daughters. And we had very explicit conversations with them about what our expectations were when our kids were at their house, and we gave them assurances of what to expect when their kids were at our house. And here's the thing, they all had friends. Every single one of them had a social life. Every single one of them has been a captain of an athletic team. 2 of them were NHS students. So if you're sitting here as the students, don't think, oh my God, my life is over. It's not. What your parents are doing, I think, is, yeah, maybe being your frontal lobe, but they're building a safety net for you and for them. Respect that. Have those conversations. Be fearless about what you talk about, because it's a lot harder to be a kid nowadays than it was in the 70s when I started high school. So here's how I'll wrap up. Thank you on behalf of Dr. Watson, Elliott, and I, because we've taken this road show out, I think, for about 7, 8 years now, and we love doing it. We look forward to coming back next week. And if you have questions, please ask. And God bless and good luck. Enjoy your year.
Wherever you're comfortable. We're very fortunate to have Mr. Pincel here as well.
Thank you. Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. You know, the joke is whenever Bill and Chris and I speak, I wrap it up, so they give me a timeline. Each gets 15 minutes. So when it's my time, they're like, you got 3 minutes. Get going. All right. A little bit about myself. I was a prosecutor at Chris Stride. I left the state attorney's office in 1996. I was in the felony criminal trial division. I specialize in sex and violent crimes. And I've been a criminal defense attorney since 1996. I've probably been involved in 25 homicide trials. I've got one going in December. I've done numerous sexual assault cases. And this case presented a unique situation, so I'm going to address this mainly to the parents. But before I get started, I did see some hands go up. How many parents heard about this case? Raise your hand, please. How many kids heard about this? None. All right. Let me tell you a little bit. This case changed the law in Illinois and pretty much around the country, but let me just explain it in a nutshell. If I provide a safe haven for underage drinking, if I'm the cool parent, I'm the party house, if I provide a safe haven for kids to drink, and I know what's going on in my house, and they go out and they hurt themselves or they hurt somebody else, I could be charged with a felony. Okay? Judge Stride talked about originally it was a misdemeanor, but now it's a felony. So let me just tell you a little bit about the hustles in our defense. The only strong defense we had is that we didn't know. It's the strongest defense you have if you're ever charged with this. I didn't know. And with the hustles, just so everybody's clear, because there's been some misconceptions about it, they weren't there when the party started. The house was alcohol-free when the party started. They didn't supply the alcohol. They didn't provide the alcohol. Judge Stride talked about it. I just want to touch it a little bit. There were 2 entrances to the basement. Normally, for those of us that are fortunate enough to have a basement, you go through the house, through the main floor, you see the people on the main floor, and you go downstairs. But the Hustles did have 2 ways to get in and out of the basement. One of the ways is through the garage, so kids could come and go without the parents even knowing about it. We lost. I represented Mrs. Hustle. We tried the cases together with Mr. and Mrs. Hustle as a unified front. And what sunk the case for us, and Judge Stride talked about it, is that one of the officers, and there was a picture of some stairs going up, the parents were really basically at the top of the stairs in the living room watching TV. There's a big TV room up there. And one of the officers said that when he got there, it smelled like a brewery. That was part of it. The other part that sunk it for us is that the dad went downstairs while kids were playing beer pong. And the third thing is a couple of the girls that were drinking were talking to Mrs. Hustle. And I think based on all that and the quantity of beer and how many people were downstairs and the cleanup afterwards, the jury convicted them. Judge Stride talked about it perfectly. There were thousands of articles written on them. It was kind of a perfect storm with the press and society wanting to get a pound of flesh or something like this, and this provided it. Since this case, I've had about 7 or 8 cases involving social hosting. And I want to talk to the parents, basically, because I know there's parties going on in Libertyville, and I have 2 kids in high school here, and I have a college kid, and we've been in here for 12 years. In representing the parents, and I've represented about 7 or 8 of them, I just want to share this with you because this is what I see. When you're charged with a crime, if Judge Stride's the person charged, and him and I are very close, our kids know each other, if he gets in trouble, I don't know him. If my kid brings 4 kegs of beer over to his house, it's not my kid's fault. I very rarely have had parents hold their kids responsible for what they do. So if my kid brings 4 kegs of beer to Mr. Stride's house and Chris gets in trouble, and he says to me, hey, your kid brought the beer, for the most part, the parents have said, listen, you're on trial, not me. I wouldn't have let my kid bring beer over there, even if it's a load of crap. I wouldn't let my kid bring the beer over there. It's your fault. He would never have gotten involved if you didn't provide that safe haven. I'm just telling you, that's what I see all the time. Now, some of the parents that I've dealt with have had this idea. And they said, you know what? I'm going to take the kids' keys. I got 8 or 10 guys on the team. They can stay in the basement. I know they're going to party. I'm going to provide the safe haven. I got the keys. They'll be fine. Well, the law not only goes after you if there's accidents or injuries involving outside the house, it also involves things that happen inside the house. So in one of my cases, one of the kids partied in the house, fell down the stairs and died. That person got charged. One of the kids ran to the bathroom. I don't know if he or she had to go to the bathroom or throw up. She fell, lost her teeth, busted her eye socket or cheekbone. That parent got charged. Now, there's also something that's really important that I think is going to strike some fear into some of the cool parents, and that is insurance companies are getting wise to this. So they create an exception. And now if something happens in your house, if something happens where a kid falls down in the house or something like that and there's no alcohol and nothing criminal going on, you claim it on your homeowners, you call the homeowner's insurance or that policy and you're covered. If this happens, you're not covered, okay? So you're out there on your own. So the kid that falls off, you know, that runs around in your house and trips and falls and dies or trips and falls and breaks something, you're on the hook for it, okay? So you cannot claim it. That includes attorney's fees and that includes damages. We were recently interviewed by someone that happened in Rolling Meadows where some kids were wasted in a guy's basement. They were, I don't know if they were smoking or someone fell asleep and there was a fire. It was a minor fire, but one of the kids got burned. They've consulted our firm. We will charge $4.50 per hour per lawyer to represent this guy. And if the case goes to trial, it's $900 an hour for 2 lawyers to defend him. So not only is he looking at least $50,000 in legal fees, but he's also looking plus damages. So that's something everybody should think about. Police also are taking a more aggressive approach. If someone leaves my house and they're under the influence, they're going to start asking questions. If a kid leaves the house and he smells of alcohol, where you been? Oh, I was at the Pincel's house. Really, where were you? Oh, I was in the main room. Where was Mr. Pincel? Where was Mrs. Pincel? Where did the alcohol come from? When did it start? When did it end? What time did you get there? What room was everybody in? How much did you have? And don't be surprised if the police come knocking at your door and saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Pincel, we've got a couple questions for you. So I'm just telling you, you got to be a little bit, you have to be pretty careful about that. And in one of the suburbs, and I won't name which one, where a lot of lawyers live, some parents have had the wise idea of saying, we've created a contract for the kids to sign. So the kid signs a contract that says, you know what, we're not going to be held liable if you screw up or do something stupid in our house. And these were drafted by lawyers, all right? So not only is that the best piece of evidence for a prosecutor, because they're going to go after you because you knew something bad was going to happen in your house, but it also doesn't hold any weight in the civil court of law. So I'm just giving you some guidance on this, that just make sure you know what's going on in your houses. Okay, the last thing you want to do is come to our office and be in that kind of trouble. I want to talk a little bit about marijuana use. And by the way, 90 to 95%, outside of simple traffic stuff, 90 to 95% of what I deal with is drug and alcohol related. I've got a sexual assault case going with a high school student who's looking at 90 years in prison. That's going in October. And I've got a homicide going in December where a young man's looking at the rest of his life flashing before his eyes. It's all drug and alcohol related. But let me just talk about marijuana for a second, because there seems to have been an acceptance in this. Do you guys have that clicker? All right. This is not a great picture because of what's going on. Just if I go back. All right, next. Marijuana. It stays in your system for 30 days. It's fat soluble. It stays in your urine for 30 days. It goes through your blood in kind of a quick, about 6, 8, 10, 12 hours. Depends on how much you use. The one before, can you guys go back? If not, I'll just deal with it. The case before with the motorcycle, factually, is a very simple case. It's a very simple case. And this doesn't really work here in the dark. If you can go back one more, that's fine. But the long and the short of it is this motorcyclist is going northbound on Green Bay Road. All right? Thank you. You can't really see, but over here is a strip mall. And there's a car right there in the upper left. And all this person's doing is they're going to try to turn left and head north also. It's a simple case. And the bottom line is this person went left to go north. They cut in front of the motorcyclist. The motorcycle dumped his bike and crashed. He died, okay? The vehicles didn't touch one another. And it's a simple accident. Accidents happen. From a criminal standpoint, the possible penalties is up to a $500 fine. That's all it is, okay? The person driving the car that turned in front of the motorcyclist ended up getting high earlier. She has 3 kids. She's never been in trouble. She's 24 years old. She turned left in front of the motorcyclist. The motorcyclist dumped. Again, they didn't touch. So factually, it's simple. But what changed this from an accident to a homicide investigation is the fact that her marijuana levels in her blood and urine were higher than the legal amount. And that's what changes a simple accident to a case where this woman's looking at 3 to 14 years in prison. Okay? And I hear a lot of kids, and I'll touch upon this in a minute. When people are in my office, when families are in my office, or kids are in my office, they are in crisis mode. The script's already been written, the play's done, the police has gotten called. If they're in front of Judge Stride, they've been battling addiction. If they're in front of Watson, they've been injured severely. So the script's already written. Everything's been done by the time they get to me. And I keep hearing, well, I didn't know, especially with marijuana. I didn't know. I didn't know. I didn't know this could cause me to be charged with a homicide. I've got a case that happened that you may have read about where the case is still pending under investigation. This 20-year-old college student is driving in Waukegan. He's FaceTiming. I don't know what the hell that means because I'm not literate on it. He's FaceTiming while driving, so he must be talking to somebody. And the car in front of him stops suddenly, and he veers in the left, goes to the left, which is where oncoming traffic is. And he hits somebody head on, okay? That other picture, that's sort of what the vehicles look like, but it doesn't matter at this point. The woman in the other car dies. There's 2 other kids in the back seat. They survived. They're now at home. One's doing okay, one's not doing so great. And I think Dr. Watson tried to save the woman. He had gotten high earlier that day also. Now, he's not being charged with anything yet because they got to order the labs and we do accident reconstruction and stuff like that. But what separates this case is he's at least going to be charged with what they call reckless homicide. Reckless homicide means that you make a knowing and substantial risk, or knowing and willful risk of, I'm screwing it up, of great bodily harm. In other words, if I get behind the wheel and I'm texting while driving, that's reckless. So it's a conscious disregard of a known substantial risk. If he's lucky, he's only going to be charged with reckless homicide. The possible penalties in reckless homicide are 3 to 7 years in the Department of Corrections, which is prison. But if his marijuana levels are high, which we think they are, he's going to be charged with DUI, death, driving under the influence of drugs causing a death, where the possible penalties are 3 to 14 years in prison. And absent special circumstances, it's mandatory that he goes to prison. And he does 85% of the time. So I'm going to cut mine short because these guys talk too damn much, and I'm forced to do this. So here's the situation that I find myself in as a defense attorney. When guys come into my office, they're in crisis mode, okay? Dr. Watson and Judge Stride and I and the police, actually, we make our money based on your bad choices. That's the truth. When you make bad choices, when you get in trouble, financially it's better for us, okay? Maybe not for law enforcement, but for us. I want you to have the conversation because there's so many times where a kid's in trouble, and I mean real trouble, and they're your age. I've had an uptick in cases where kids are between 14 and 22, and it'll be a drug and alcohol issue, and I'll ask them, you know, why haven't you guys talked about it? Or am I the first person to talk about it? Or when's the last time you got high? And I'll have the parents answer for them. Well, when's the last time you got high? Well, he doesn't get high. Okay, do me a favor. Just go in the other room. I want to talk to your son or daughter. When's the last time you got high? Well, you know, I don't get high. Okay, judge is going to drug test you on Friday. When's the last time you got high? Well, 2 days ago. What about before that? Well, the weekend before that. What about before that? The weekend before that. Those are the questions I'll ask in front of parents. And sometimes the kids get offended. And I'll ask mom and dad, hey, why didn't you talk about this? Why haven't you discussed it? And it's, well, you know, he's a varsity athlete. You know, he's going to college. He's interviewing here. He's got a good job. He's a National Honor Society student. With the level of addiction and alcoholism that I see, I don't care what race you are, your religion, what your dad does. I've represented addicts that are high school dropouts. I've represented addicts that are lawyers, doctors, attorneys, judges, teachers, you name it, it cuts across everybody. And it's not everybody else's problem, and Dr. Watson touched upon it. He goes, hey, you know, people think, hey, it's a North Chicago problem. It's everybody's problem. It's important, it bothers me that sometimes the only person that's addressed the issue with your kid is me. And by that time, the script's already written. So I don't give advice. I listen when I'm in my office. I don't tell people what I think. But I'm just telling you, I've got more people who are more pissed at law enforcement for doing their job than why they are in my office. I don't like the way the officer treated my daughter. Well, how about the fact your daughter's getting high on cocaine and it's Tuesday morning while school's in session? Yeah, but I don't like the way they talk to my kid. I'm like, focus on what's important. My wife asked me one time, she said, listen, express to them how to do it. And I don't know how to do it. But I know if you know why you're doing it, this is the most important thing to talk about. I encourage you to talk about it. My goal was to make all of you uncomfortable because the idea of not talking about it, I want that to bother you more than discussing it. To the school, thank you guys. It is, the last time we were here with Judge Stride and I, there were 6 of us and there were 5 people out here. It's a pleasure to have it, and to the school, I thank you for your time.
So we're going to wrap up here with just a couple of comments about where as a school and where as parents and the community we can go with this. There is sort of different levels that we could ask you to take, and the foundation of the pyramid is exactly what Mr. Pincel just said, which is talk frequently with your child. Mr. Woods is our athletic director, but he's the parent of 2 college-age students. I have 3 children, 2 are in high school. I have a son who's a senior. We talk about drug and alcohol use every single weekend that goes out. We talk about it. We talk about the choices he's going to be confronted with, the choices he's going to make. We have to talk about it often because I have to be his frontal lobe, right? So that one-time conversation, once, you know, at the start of the school year or once before homecoming, that's got to be repeated. In my opinion, in my house, that conversation gets repeated frequently. And the values of our family and what we're all about and why we choose to support one another in these opportunities to stay drug and alcohol free. You may want to move it further to talking with other parents. So calling other parents as Judge Stride does, saying, here are my expectations for my children. Here are my expectations when my children's with you. If you have difficulty, I call parents and say, hey, I work with high school kids. If you need help, if stuff starts happening and you need to clear your house out, call me over and I will come over and help you with that. But expectation, I always appreciate it when parents call me and say, my child's coming to your house, are you going to be there? What's going to be going on? I welcome that phone call. And unfortunately, I don't think it happens enough, but I'm always making that call. You can educate yourself on teen development. We're recommending 2 books Age of Opportunity and the Teenage Brain. Age of Opportunity is about raising adolescents in today's complicated world. Teenage Brain is a little bit more about what's going on inside their skull and how that the new research talks about the damage that different things cause. And then lastly, if you are really able and willing, we're looking for volunteers in Libertyville Connect, a community-wide organization. We have representatives here from Lake County Health Department who can help you get connected with Libertyville Connect. When you're talking, just the three things, if you're saying, boy, this is a hard conversation, really all you need to do is talk about your family values. You can talk about refusal strategies. So when your child is being offered alcohol at a party, being offered drugs, you know, what is the way you say no to that? And John has a great story about when his daughter was little, they used to practice stranger danger all the time. They used to have grandma pull up with a bag of gummy bears and invite the girl over to the car, right, John?
It's
right?
true.
And they would practice. What do you say to a stranger who's offering you candy? Let's practice as a family. And this same idea, what do you say to friends who are offering this? How do you save face and still be able to refuse? And then ultimately, what's your exit strategy? I talk about that with my son all the time. Like, you've got that gut feeling that stuff's not going to go well here. What do you do to exit that situation? How do you get out of that? Is that you texting me and me calling and saying, Jet, you got to come home because I need the car? And then you say to your friends like, oh man, my dad's such a jerk, I got to go home. Is that your exit strategy? Is it, my dad's a principal and he heard about this party through the grapevine and I got to get out of here? Right? Like, we have those exit strategies. We practice those things. So that is all the conversation needs to be. But John, you want to just talk for just a moment about the value piece and how that relates to our work at the school?
Yeah, real quick. Wow. Can everybody hear me? It's really loud. I just wanted to share a quick story. When I was thinking about what to share tonight, I was stuck on a couple things. So I called my daughter and asked her, why didn't you drink in high school? And she said, well, Daddy, it's because of who I am. And I said, oh, and talk to me a little bit about that. And so she told me the story. She was going through Rush. She's at ISU. She's a freshman. And she was torn about doing the Greek life because our family just didn't do that. We were athletes, and that was our fraternity, sorority thing, and she wanted to do the Greek thing. And so we supported her. And through the journey over the last couple of weeks, she spent 2 weeks going through 8 different sororities. And she landed on one that she hoped she got a bid from. And she called me and she was in tears and she said, Daddy, I got so emotional when I visited this sorority. And I said, well, what happened? She said, because they were the only ones that had their vision, their mission, and their core values written down, and they could articulate them. And they reminded me of you and Mama. And she was emotional. You can't imagine how I was. I was a mess. And so when I think about this, how many of you drove tonight here? How many of you exceeded the speed limit on? Don't answer that. Sorry. Don't answer that. If we emphasize the consequences, we know the educational component. We know the consequence of going 37 in a 35-mile-an-hour speed zone. What is it that works? And we got to get back to who we are. And so think about the values that you share, the values, the way you live your life. And if we spend time practicing with our kids, stranger danger, the gummy bears were real. And they were real good because Grandma gave them to me when she was done with the whole routine. But we didn't wait until they were teenagers to practice stranger danger. We didn't wait until they were teenagers to teach our core values. And we didn't only teach it one time, something that we do every day. And so when we think about those conversations that are difficult to have, they're only difficult to have because we don't have them. And the more we have them, the easier they become. to have. I had that conversation with my son last night, who's a junior at Michigan State University. He's a captain on the swim team. He's a 9-time record holder. He's a state champ. He's a 3-time All-American. Just found out that he earned academic All-American status for the 2nd consecutive year. And I asked him, what is it like to be you? And he said, Daddy, from day one, you and Mama raised me to understand the importance of character. And he reminded me of his freshman year when he was in love for the very first time with a young lady that lived down the street, and she was older, and I wasn't happy about it. And I didn't know if I wasn't happy because I didn't like her, or if I didn't like the fact that she was dating my son, and it turned out to be both. And and my wife taught me to bite my tongue, which is sometimes hard to do, but she told me that he had to learn for himself and make decisions based on what we taught him from day one. And a couple months later, he calls me and he says, Daddy, we broke up. And I said, I'm really sorry to hear that. On the inside, I was not. But I said all the right things that I was supposed to say at the time, and I said, what happened? And he said, Daddy, her reputation is more important than her character to her. You see, she had a reputation of being a party girl, and he was trying to change her, and he realized you can't change folks. But he realized the importance of character. And so when I asked him last night, what's it like to be you? It was refreshing to hear him go back to those core values. And when we talked about those refusal strategies, we talked about stranger danger, we would practice on the phone. Okay, now remember, here's how we do it. And the kids at the high school, where I was in Champaign, knew my reputation. And so it was easy for our kids to have the out. Practice stranger danger. Practice friend danger. Practice getting out of situations that you know could have a sad ending. And do it often. Every opportunity you get, and don't wait.
And then we have a great phrase that we use all the time in our house, which is, we trust you, but we're going to verify. So, we ask for the story, and we don't hide. We talk about what we're going to do to verify. I am going to call the parents. I'm going to ask you to check in with me a couple times in the evening, right? And it's all laid out in front, so that I'm never accused of sneaking around my child or trying to figure out what they're doing. I trust you. I trust you're telling me these things, but I am going to verify. That's my job as your parent, to make sure you're safe, to make sure we're safe in our family. And as a school, this is where we're moving. Our Life of a Wildcat is not an anti-drug and alcohol initiative. It is about us talking about who we are, what our values are, and how we live those values on a daily basis. And our ultimate goal of where we're moving to, with your support, is that our kids don't wear the drug and alcohol shirt on the first day because we're telling them it's against the rules, because we're telling them they'll get in trouble for wearing them. It's because they decide that's not us. That's not who we are. That's the school, that's the community we're trying to build. And I thank you so much for being here tonight to be part of that. I'm sorry we don't have time for questions. We will stay and talk, and if you email me any questions, I will get them to the appropriate people up here to get you an answer. Thank you very much for coming.